All right, let's talk, another mock draft. This is Mel Kiper. So I actually did one on a Kiper and Field Yates's mock draft. They did one together. So I might know a decent amount of kind of where his head's at already, but still, it is going to be different. So I figured it's still worth, an interesting discussion, I think, as, Caleb Williams going first overall. That's, what we're all going to do here. Should mention, this whole article is on ESPN.com. If you want to kind of read through it, get more of your thoughts. Obviously, you can find plenty of Mel Kiper's content on YouTube as well if you want to search that out. But yeah, he has Daniels going too. So, I think Yates had number 2 in the when I did earlier, and he also went with Daniels. I feel like the more common thing I'm seeing now is Daniels at number 2 more so than Drake May. That's what I'm seeing, which is surprising to me. I really think Drake May is the better player, but okay, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I am lower on Daniels than most, so I'm interested in seeing how that works. But Kiper does then say Drake May goes to the Patriots at 3. I know my podcast co-host Kyle would be very thrilled if this ends up happening. Number 4, Marvin Harrison Jr. Sure. Number 5. So okay. This was, I believe this was also in that last mock draft I did with both of them. They have J.J. McCarthy going at number 5 to the Vikings. The Vikings trade up, which, again, I think it's interesting. For the Chargers, do you want to give up on an elite level prospect to kind of move out of the elite level prospect area, but you're getting the extra draft capital? And for the Vikings, is it worth that trade up? I just don't know. Maybe. But let's move on to number 6. Giants get Malik Neighbors. Number 7, Titans get Joe Alt. Kind of the usual suspects here. Dallas Turner, as always, goes to the Falcons. Romeo Odunze is going to now go to the Bears, as this is, again, definitely a decision, right? I mean, they don't have to go with Odunze, and, I think you could consider Bowers as well. I know they have a tight end, but you could consider that as well. But, I mean, at this point, why not give a great receiving core for your young quarterback? I would totally be a fan of it if the Bears decide to do something like this. Although I do also wonder, does Atlanta trade down with a wide receiver needy team? Even something like the Jets, who are next, who go with Bowers, do the Jets kind of trade up with the Titans or the Falcons? Or I think Falcons would make the most sense. Trade up with the Falcons, leapfrog the Bears, and get a receiver. That would make sense to me. But again, if they get Bowers, they get Bowers. That's not a terrible selection. J.C. Latham with the Chargers is one that this feels like a bit of a reach for me. It just does. I think that's a bit rich for my blood. I think there's other good tackles out there. Again, I believe they did this in the last mock draft, so definitely some carryover here. Although Quinyon Mitchell to the Broncos is interesting. That is not something that they did in the last draft. Again, certainly not their biggest need, but I guess you could look at Denver and say they're paying $1 billion to Russell Wilson this year. Maybe they should just draft the player they think is best on their big board. And I kind of agree with that. Now, no quarterback, but, again, I think that it's one of the things where I do wonder if Bo Nix is still there in the second round. Maybe it's similar to Tennessee where they do get Will Levis, just not in the first round. Or maybe they trade back to the end of the first round and get him there. Quinyon Mitchell will be a very good player. Talise Fuaga for the Raiders, sure. Think he's very good. That would make sense. And Olu Fashanu. And they shortened the name Olu. So that's, nice. Don't have to spell it out all the way. Yeah, the only thing, as Kiper brings up, the only thing you kind of think about is you are essentially giving up on Trevor Penning at this point. Although, maybe you put him in as a guard or something. I don't know. It's interesting how that could work. But Teron Arnold for the Colts, I feel like that gets mocked every time. And then Choi Fatanu, again, a lot of times people are mocking guards to Seattle. Or just offensive linemen in general to Seattle. Not sure if that'd be my pick either, though. Maybe I just disagree with some of the offensive line takes going on. I don't know. But Cooper DeJean to the Jaguars, interesting. So, again, feels a bit rich for my blood. It feels a bit of a hot take here, but not a hot take, but like a bit of a reach for me, but nothing crazy. I don't think that he's like a bad prospect. I think he'd be worth a first round pick. I would just have him a little lower in the first round, and I have a few corners I like a little more. But I don't know. Some people, there's people who really like Cooper DeJean. Like PFF has him as at number 10 or I believe number 9 on their big board. But I don't know about that. Just me personally, not sure if I agree. Byron Murphy to the Bengals, which could happen. feels like a dream scenario for the Bengals. If I'm a Bengals fan, that's when I'm like, please let that happen. Let's make sure we get Byron Murphy. That'd be great. Leo Latu to the Rams feels like a lot of mock drafts have him going there. And again, it feels like a steal. I think Latu is a better player than just the 19th best player. So getting him at 19 would be a steal in my opinion. Graham Barton to the Steelers, sure, definitely a quality interior offensive lineman, which is a position of need. I think the Steelers want to go there, so would not be mad at that. Although, personally, I'd rather Jackson Powers-Johnson. That's just me. Jared Verse to the Dolphins. Again, they have their edge rusher injuries, so it makes some sense. Maybe they'll all come back and look great, but that's not the worst thing in the world. I guess the only question is, maybe you feel like, well, in the next 4 years, we hope that Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb are both good again, in which case, then, you kind of have wasted a pick. But again, I mean, Jalen Phillips was the Achilles injury. Guys usually don't come back from Achilles injuries the same. That's actually more uncommon than you would think. Like, it's the odds of a guy coming back from an Achilles injury and being just as good as they ever were are against them. And so maybe getting a insurance policy wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but also kind of just a bummer to bet against Jalen Phillips because he's so fun when he's healthy. Nate Wiggins is, for the Philadelphia Eagles, a very smart fit. That would totally make sense. Xavier Worthy to the Chargers. Okay. Again, they could use a receiver, maybe trying to, honestly, they could use a couple, so maybe trying to, get guys later on in the draft, but no Brian Thomas Jr. yet. That's a surprise that he is, falling so much. I don't know if I would agree with Worthy over Brian Thomas Jr. That feels like a bit of a hot take to me. Tyler Guyton to the Cowboys. Again, I get they could use an offensive lineman, but this feels a bit of a reach for me personally. Okay, so full disclosure, gotta explain what just happened. For you, nothing happened. For me, something happened. So I finished the video. I was just about to hit the end record button. I literally had just said, as always, thanks for watching. And right as I did it, the power went out, and I lost the end of this video. So I'm having to reshoot it now, which is fine, but it means that we're now no longer getting my first reaction to this mock draft. I have seen what happened, but I'll pretend like I haven't, I suppose. Let's just get into it. 25 was Armarius Mims for the Packers, which I think is a good pick. I like Armarius Mims. I don't think offensive line is their biggest need the way people make it out to be sometimes, but at the same time, they could certainly use a guy there. Who couldn't use an offensive lineman, right? Then for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I've seen this a couple times. Them getting Chop Robinson would be a move I'd be in favor of as a Tampa Bay fan. It's a position of need, so definitely something that I would be in favor of. And even without it being a position of need, I just think he's worth a pick this high. I think this is a good, I think he's a good player. Number 27, Darius Robinson, which again, I don't know exactly what to make of him. Kind of a, definitely one of those weird guys where I feel like a lot of times the guys who are like, well, he's too big to play edge rusher, but not big enough to play defensive tackle. A lot of times they just don't work in the NFL level, but there is a lot to like about him as well. So we'll see. And then 28, this was kind of the biggest surprise. Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Bills, which is, listen, I don't think he'll still be there at 28, but maybe you could trade up and get him. And if he does fall, maybe there are people who say, there's some concerns here. I'm not as into him. Well, then, if he is someone who does fall like that, I do not think this would be a terrible move whatsoever for the Bills, who could use another receiver. And hey, him catching Josh Allen bombs, that would just be fun. So they could use wide receiver help. He's certainly someone who I think would help them. So I would be a big fan of this move. Even if they traded up to get him, I would still be a fan of it, I think. Adonai Mitchell for the Lions is they're in kind of a weird spot where there isn't a ton of needs. I would disagree with this pick, though, just because, Coy McKinstry is going next to the Ravens, and I'd rather have McKinstry. I just would. I think the Lions would be better off with a corner. I also think McKinstry is a better player than Mitchell, a better prospect. So, I think if you really want some wide receiver depth, which you could definitely use, again, it's such a deep class. I'd rather them wait on that. Personally, that's just how I view it. McKinstry would be a great pick for the Ravens as well, though. So, big fan of that. Here's another one that was kind of a surprise. the 49ers going with Roger Rosengarten, the offensive lineman out of Washington, which I have not done a deep dive on Rosengarten, so I can't sit here and say if that's a horrible pick or a great pick or anything like that, but just seems like it would be a bit of a reach here for the 49ers at 31. I know they need offensive line help, but if you're getting a guy who's a second-round talent just because you want the need, don't do that. Sign a veteran. There's ways you can fill the need that aren't reaching in the draft, in my opinion. Xavier Leggetti for the Chiefs certainly makes sense. Again, the Chiefs don't have to go receiver. People keep saying they have receiver. There are other positions of need for Kansas City, but wide receiver is certainly a big one. So I would understand it. And then, he did a 2-round mock draft. I'm not going to go through all of the second-round picks, just kind of the highlights here. Kiper has the Giants trading up for Bo Nix at 33, which is a surprise. They added Malik Neighbors earlier in this mock draft, if you remember, so they would, kind of build a better situation, and it could be similar to Will Levis, where maybe they say, hey, we're going to, get a quarterback, but we're not going to break the bank for one. If a quarterback happens to be there at round 2, we'll trade up and make it happen, but we're not going to, go all out and spend the 6th overall pick on Bo Nix. We'll get him at, early in the 2nd round. Would not hate that. A couple other things like, okay, Keon Coleman to the Patriots, sure. The other interesting one, I think, is at 37, Michael Penix Jr. going to the Rams, which would be very fascinating to me because, listen, my first reaction was, what are you doing? You can't do this. But as I think about it more, I understand the logic. It would be very similar to maybe the Packers drafting Jordan Love. Of, hey, here's a guy who maybe, we'll let him sit. We'll let him kind of learn behind Stafford. Stafford is getting up there in age. I still think that the Rams are close enough to being a competitive team right now. I don't know if I would love for them to do this, but I don't know. It'd be interesting. It certainly would. So yeah, those are kind of, the key notable picks. The Panthers trade back, still get their receivers, so there you go. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on Kiper's mock draft here. I won't scroll till the end. If you want to see the whole 2-round mock draft, you got to click on his video and search it that way if you want to see what else happens. But yeah, those are my thoughts on all of this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.